Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Ellen Greer. I'm on the Climate Action Committee in Eastham, and we have other Climate Action Committee members here too. If you want to put your hand up and say hi, this is your Climate Action Committee here. And tonight we are actually presenting, this is our third event for our spring speaker series, and tonight it's in collaboration with the Recycling Committee. Anybody wants to raise their hand there? There's your Recycling Committee, yay. And I got a couple of announcements. The Eastham Food Waste Drop-Off Program is now in operation at the transfer station. It's been funded by a grant by the Mass DEP, and so signage and bins to put your compost in are there at the transfer station. So, and then I think I gave everybody a flyer on June 15th for home composting. We're having a home composting workshop right here in this room. It's going to be a kind of a hands-on thing. From 5 to 7 p.m. on Thursday, June 15th. So hopefully people will come and see that. It'll be, you'll see you'll actually hear about some significant data on the effects of food waste decomposing in landfills. You're going to see some different methods of home composting, from open piles to vermiculture, worms, some indoor devices, and all things that are related to composting. There might even be some sign-ups for compost tours. So it's kind of an open house kind of thing, but there will be a presentation at 5 by one of our Climate Action Committee members, who's not here. But tonight we're going to hear about the science, economy, and politics of composting in 2023. Our guest speaker has had a long career as an activist for social, environmental, and economic justice. Her life's work has been building innovative responses and equitable solutions with focus on circular zero waste economics. She is a founder of Zero, a worker-owned business providing food waste services to institutions and food industries in Greater Boston. She currently consults, trains, and mentors startups, municipalities, and organizations on community composting. So she's going to tell you all about all this good stuff anyway, much better than me. And so with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Laura Holmes.
Hello, hi everybody. It's so nice to see you all. It's, the sun is finally out and it's getting nicer out, and for you to take some of your valuable time. This is the topical content that I've prepared to talk with you guys about today, and I'm excited to also engage with you more about the very exciting things Ellen was talking about that are happening around here. So here's the invitation for the check-in. You can take it or leave it. If you have a question or something you hope we'll talk about related to this topic today, please share that. I'm going to talk about sort of the what's of composting, the whys of composting at a variety of scales, from backyard to small business to large business to industry to death of the planet. I don't know. The business of compost. And compost as waste or resource might also have a subtitle under it saying the politics of compost. All in the conceptualization and branding of the stuff. And then we'll open it up. So hopefully we get through this. And I really welcome folks to help me make this be as responsive to what you're interested in as possible with your questions and interruptions if necessary. So what is compost? I would say compost is kind of magical. It's this regenerative, transformative, very natural process that the earth has been doing by herself for gazillions of years, right? And, you know, I'm really evangelical about it, to be right up front, right at the beginning with you all. I mean, I feel like when we engage with composting, it strengthens our connection with the earth. You know, this is where I come from with this. We get to participate in that active regeneration process. We get to be a part of it and help it along and witness it. You know, if you've ever participated in composting, or if you've ever just amended your own soil at home with compost products, and you're digging in the dirt, and the way that it smells and the way that it feels, it's just like really magical. But you know, on a whole bunch of other levels, it's also a means that's really important in us closing the food loop, dealing with our waste, you know, building circular economies, and so many community benefits come along with composting. And that's really what I hope to talk about more. Getting into some of that science stuff. I may not be as deep in the data with this presentation, but there's lots of it, and we can find a lot of it. Fortunately, this has been studied a lot. Actually, in our landfills, a quarter of the material in our landfills is food waste. I'm not talking about all compostable stuff. I'm not talking about agricultural. I'm talking about food. When I was involved with SETO in our business, we used to estimate that about a half a pound of waste was generated with every meal that we ate, that we cook, that we go out for in a restaurant, that we get in schools or in hospitals or wherever. That's a lot of food waste. And, you know, unfortunately, when food waste breaks down, well, fortunately and unfortunately, the biological mechanisms, the bugs, eat it up, and that's really good, and they produce methane gas as they break that down. It's basically bug farts producing methane in our landfills, which can be captured and utilized and dealt with in a proper way. And in our home composting, the methane does not get leaked into the environment the way that it does in landfills, where there's these deep concentrations. And the point is, what you want to do is you want to separate it away. Methane, by the way, is you know, a really important greenhouse gas. It's one of the most toxic greenhouse gases. It's extremely potent and long-lasting in the environment. It's really dangerous. And the third highest source of all the sources of methane, landfills are third, only behind fossil fuels and industrial animal-based agriculture. So there's a lot of methane production happening out of our landfills. And the point is, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, methane is playing a significant role in climate warming. So why compost is awesome, one of the many reasons why composting is awesome, is because it's an alternative way of dealing with this. Not the food waste shouldn't go into the landfill in the first place. We should be source separating it, diverting it, and composting it. And there are many, many different ways to compost it, and we'll talk about that. But when you compost, it actually becomes a carbon sponge. Whether that's land applied, you know, you can put a half an inch of compost on a field and you can measure the amount of carbon it literally sucks from the air and sequesters that safely in the soil, and then it becomes useful nutrients for plants and microorganisms and animals ultimately, and the whole food cycle, right? So that's why compost is awesome. It also is restoring all those nutrients. It helps soil retain moisture better. Out here, especially, this is something that I didn't hear anybody bring up, but I think it's an important thought in composting out of the Cape, and that is truck traffic. And we'll get more into that. Like, where is the compost that you're dropping off at the Eastham transfer station going? You know, so community composting would be about processing that locally. Instead, we're trucking it away. So, you know, if we could figure out how to do that, we could reduce it. And it has many, many, many more community benefits. There's a lot of reasons why the Cape is ideally suited, I believe, and I think you will too, for developing a really good composting infrastructure. We've got what it takes here. So, partially in response to this crisis in the landfills, especially in Massachusetts, we don't have any extra space in the landfills. Most of the landfills operating now were scheduled to have been closed, some of them decades ago. And they keep trying to expand them, and there's been lots of problems with them, besides the methane, lots of other kind of toxic leakage. And, you know, citizens have started to wake up about all this and are not going to support additional landfills. So, partially in response to this, the Mass DEP introduced this food waste ban in 2012. And it was the beginning, the first steps in trying to divert all compostable material out of the landfills and the incinerators and the places that they have gone for as long as we've had a waste industry, and instead composting them again, which some generations ago, not in my memory, but there are a lot of people around the world who have been familiar with composting as the right way to manage waste. So it's not new. And there's been a lot of innovation around it, but it's not a new thing. So the Mass DEP introduced this food waste ban and says that 2 years from now, they introduce it in 2012, and they say in 2014, any entity that produces 1 ton or more per week of food waste. Now, 1 ton, it's a lot more than a household, but it's not a lot for a restaurant. It's not a lot for a school or a hospital. So this was the way of trying to get the larger generators of food waste. Industry, you know, food manufacturing businesses have a lot of compost. The cannabis industry has a lot of compost. And so this is where they started. Now they have bolstered that, and now it's a 1/2 ton of food waste. So 1,000 pounds of food waste is probably produced by many of the restaurants across the Cape. Grocery stores have a lot of compost. There's a lot of food that goes out for waste. Something like, this is an astounding fact, and I can't be quite held to it, but it's something like 80% of all food produced or grown in the United States is wasted. It doesn't get eaten by people or animals or sentient beings. It's terrible. So this is the context in which, I forgot to do this. I have to change both slides because I have my notes on this one. And that's the wrong way. Ba-bum. So in the context of learning about this waste ban, I had just started a new job, which was what was to become Seto Cooperative. But back in 2012, it was a group of folks from Roxbury and Dorchester, working class people. It was a very interesting Boston multicultural group of black, brown, Latinos, gay and straight folks who felt like they wanted to start their own business. They wanted to start a cooperative, worker-owned cooperative, and they wanted it to be a green business. They felt there were not enough green-collar jobs in their communities, and they wanted to be part of this. And they advertised looking for a startup manager, and that's the job I had applied for. And it was my first day on the job working with these folks that I went to this Zero Waste Conference and learned about that food waste ban. And now I'm working with this group of folks who want to do something in recycling. They are truck drivers, they've worked in the food businesses, They've worked in community organizing and community education and public health. And so it seemed like we had good ingredients for starting up composting businesses. And there wasn't a lot of it happening yet. I mean, this still is a new industry in this sense. In response to this food waste ban, we saw the opportunity that, you know, everybody's going to have to compost. And right now, very few people are composting. And so we set about signing up customers like Northeastern University and America's Food Basket in our neighborhoods, and help them set up source separation for the compostable materials. We had our own bins, and we trained their staff, which was also a great way of getting community buy-in. And then we provided the hauling services. We were really a hauling business that was also socially motivated to have people do it the right way, because we would pick up the waste and we were making sure that the material was properly composted, and that it resulted in beautiful compost products, because we then brought that soil back into the community to support urban farming and stuff like that. So this was a closed food loop business. And when I left last year, we were recycling about 100 tons a week of food waste from a variety of customers in the Boston area. So it's a growth industry. And while we were at that, a lot of people were envisioning what the food waste industry looked like. And they also saw the business opportunity of people need to compost stuff. Interestingly, you know, and all the same players who have always been in the waste industry. You can think about The Sopranos if you have that kind of imagery, and you wouldn't be that far off from my experience in Massachusetts. But you know, the waste haulers, also the trash haulers, were going to be required to offer food waste collection services. So they also, you know, offered their customers these bins for separating the food waste, only they didn't teach anybody how to separate. They just said, put your food waste in there and put your trash in there. That's how they have developed their business. And that was some of Seto's competition. And for customers who weren't savvy about it, they thought that they were composting. But the truth of the matter is, most of that ends up in a landfill or the incinerator anyway, because they're not source separating. And it's not in the industry's interest to invest resources in teaching us how to source separate. You know, they don't care what bin you put, they'll take it. They're going to get paid for it, no matter which bin you put it in. And you know, incineration and landfill is where most of the food waste, sadly, is still ending up. And so these are our options. And then there's another option which has become really predominant, and this is co-digesting food waste with sewerage. So what they propose to do now is, again, pick up whatever you put in the compost bin. And a lot of cities and towns who think they're doing this great thing, like Cambridge, Massachusetts, they have curbside composting citywide. What happens to the compost they put in those bins is it gets trucked to an environmental justice community in Charlestown, where it is put into a giant slurry plant where they grind it up. They put it through filters to filter out the plastic and the garbage or whatever of it they can, and they throw that in the trash pile. The rest of they create a slurry. They add water to the rest of the organics, and then they pump it into tanker trucks, and they truck it up to Lawrence, another environmental justice community, where they unload those trucks into the wastewater treatment facility. and combine that food with the wastewater. So you're not making compost now. What you're doing is you're turning food into sewage. You're not turning sewage into compost. Although the byproduct of that process, called sludge, is sold and marketed as compost, as land applicable products. And a lot of it has been spread around in Maine for some reason. And they found great degrees of PFAS in that soil. Can you imagine? So coming from, it may have come from your toilet, along with your food waste, up through all those processes. They're charging us for this. They're charging us for this, and they're greenwashing. This is legally considered composting, when what it actually is putting our food down the toilet. Yeah. Is anybody pissed off yet? I work with a relatively new national organization called Just Zero, which I encourage people to look at. And my friend Laura Orlando is a civil engineer who teaches at Boston University and also probably knows more about sewer sludge than anybody on the planet. This is a quote from an article. There's a link in that PowerPoint somewhere that she wrote about this, how the waste industry has set us up for this bait and switch, so that we're just flush the food down the toilet. Don't truck it if that's what you're going to do. And I heard talk that there are people in Eastham who think that it'll be a good idea when you all build your wastewater treatment facility to use that for processing your food waste also. So I hope to deputize all of you to make that not happen. Or at least let's have some really deep conversations about it first. Yeah, that's what's happening. So there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and there must be a better way, and yes, there are better ways, and we're going to go to that next. You want to? Yes. Yeah. So I don't want to go through this in too much detail unless anybody is really into it, but our friends at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which is a great resource for all things environmental and local, came up with this sort of pyramid of what we want to do with our food waste and our compostables and our recyclables, for that matter, is always aimed for highest and best use, right? And so this pyramid shows the best uses is source reduction, right? The best way to deal with food waste is not to waste it. And all the other things that we know about. And then on down, home composting is really, really good. Small-scale decentralized composting is really, really good. Sometimes that's community composting. Sometimes that's commercial composting also. And anaerobic digestion is in there, but it's in there to a greater extent. If you have dedicated anaerobic digesters, you can get a lot more out of the product. So there are many, many better ways. So there's a lot of alternatives, and you all have brought up many of them and experienced some of them that are good for people on the planet, and that may be even profitable. When we were doing Seto Cooperative, it was a private worker-owned co-op, and there's a whole story behind how we got the community to invest in it and how we had to raise money to invest in it, and it's an expensive business. But we were profitable in selling our services to our customers of picking up their compost and keeping their waste streams clean. And then again, we would sell back the soil in the growing season. And so there were places that we could do profitable stuff with it. And people who we didn't run our own composting facilities, but our partners did. And there's good money to be made out here, can you imagine? If we could develop really high quality Cape Cod local compost products. Everybody's into gardening down here, come on. People buy a lot of, Coast of Maine? I know I do.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why don't we do some Cape Cod coast soil of our own down here?
Coast to Cape Cod.
And here's one example of how that closed loop food circular economy can look. This is starting up in the right-hand corner. This is Luther, who ran Dudley Doe Pizza Shop. And this was an event that Seto Co-op hosted in 2016 in the summertime in Nubian Square. It used to be Dudley Square in the heart of Boston in Roxbury. And we did a walking tour, and we started at Dudley Doe Pizzeria. No, we actually ended up at Dudley Doe Pizzeria, but the story starts with Dudley Doe Pizzeria because they were composting customers for Seto Co-op. And you can see one of Seto's big blue trucks dumping a load of food waste at one of our composting farms. And then those gorgeous pictures of vegetables where we walked up the street a half a mile to Haley House Farm, and Haley House runs a soup kitchen in the Back Bay in Boston. And they also run this farm, which teaches people about farming and offers some people jobs in the heart of Roxbury also. And the folks on our tour, picked herbs and some veggies. And then we looped back to Nubian Square and had a pizza party with herbs grown on the farm and all that kind of stuff. And, all along that food loop, we're getting that local benefit. And it really did help people feel connected to it. And, it's small, but we can do lots and lots of small things, right? And now we're into the examples of composting systems. I can see it better here than I can there. And if you look at that slide, that's another slide from a report anybody can look at from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. They really have taken the lead in community composting nationally. They've helped to convene trainings for composters. They have convened conferences where community composters come together and put together collaborative partnerships and share knowledge and information, and they've really supported a lot of growth in community composting. So up there on the left, you see, and here's some examples that have a range of scale to them, right? That's a large scale, probably city size municipal windrow up at the top with the fancy equipment where they have a machine that turns the entire row all at once. And then they have, there's a lot of technology now for coverings that you can use over the compost piles, and really amazing best practices at every scale have really been developed. And then in the middle you see Brenda Platt, who is really one of the leaders in community composting, working with one of those bins that I'm not sure they should really sell those bins because it's probably the most difficult way to try and compost in the world. And I think it might have a reverse impact of turning people off from composting. But I like Brenda, and it's a good picture. And then there's a community composting potential system of 3 bins. I have a smaller 3-bin system in my yard, which I love. That you open up the doors on the front of the bin, and you can rake out your pile, and you can turn it and put it back in, or you can move it over to the next bin and let it cure a little more, and then throw in a bunch of leaves, and mix your recipe as you go. And that's how pretty much all composting happens in a good way. And you want to have your 2/3 carbon to 1/3 food. And that's at whatever scale you're doing it. And so if your compost operation in your backyard isn't working well, it can work better. You got to put a little bit of time into it, but it really doesn't have to be horrible to do that. And then moving down, there's I think that's vermiculture in Washington, D.C. Hello. And the one in the middle bottom is an in-vessel system. So that may be one that turns, or it may be anaerobic digester. I think it's an anaerobic digester, a little miniature one. And then another windrow operation. The point being, you can do this at a lot of different scales. I mean, I think there are, again, let's get back to the advantages we have out here at the Cape and the resources that are really close at hand, if not already set up. It is very beneficial land use, and I think there's places here where composting can be set up relatively easily. I've talked with a lot of people, not to mention our transfer stations. I mean, most of the towns have transfer stations that they're managing, and they're constantly improving them. I mean, it's environmentalists. I know, I live in Wellfleet, and at our transfer station, they're always, looking for the next recycling program opportunity and always learning the new things. So far, I haven't talked to any that are including food waste in their municipal composting. The person from Truro, did you say they're putting food waste in theirs?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's something that could be explored, I think, relatively easily. And there are plenty of resources for that kind of stuff. I've talked to people who are in the business of dirt and gravel and are interested in potentially composting. The folks at Amberlin at Boston Sand and Gravel would love to learn more about composting and potentially be part of a pilot project. There's just so much good potential out here. And again, we should want to deal with this hauling thing. So while I think it's great that they're doing the drop-off programs, we started drop-off programs at Cerro also, and we worked with transfer stations to set up some community drop-off programs. It's better than not source separating it. It's not, if it's the best option that we have. The worst thing about it here is that all of the haulers, as far as I know, are taking the stuff off Cape. So they're driving their trucks every day over the bridge twice. Yes?
Some of the towns are on Cape, there's a mix.
The towns are on Cape? They're processing their own?
A.J. Watts Farms, which takes it from Wellfleet and Dennis.
Oh, good.
Truro and Dennis, I might be getting mixed up anyway.
Which
That's
farm
on
is that?
Cape. A.J. Watts picks up some towns, and that's on Cape. But anyway, they still have to pick it up and truck it.
Right.
Right. But it's not all going off Cape.
So, a great alternative. The more decentralized and localized we can get, the better, right? Another thing to think about here is not just the homes, but the businesses. And especially now that the waistband has been updated and it's only a half a ton now, it's only 1,000 pounds a week, there's lots and lots of impacted institutions and businesses on the Cape. And I don't know how many of them are composting or who does, but I can bet you there's a lot who are not yet. And I'm not sure that that means because they don't want to. It's just usually, in my experience, somebody introduces them to it and encourages, incentivizes. It's a lot of community education involved in this stuff. I have worked with high school groups who start composting programs at their schools. And that's another, you know, there's as many things as there are ideas, I think, that can be done. Oh, these are just examples of products that, you know, that potentially we could make. And, you know, Black Earth, who is a colleague of mine, the folks who run Black Earth, and I know Black Earth does a lot of the hauling down here. And, you know, I like Connor a lot. They're interested in doing it the right way, and I'm glad they're doing it. But I think that they would be interested in helping if we wanted to develop local facilities. They know how to do it. The guru of all, sorry?
I think that's the group who's shipping East Hams over the bridge.
Yep, Black Earth is doing a lot of the contracts down here. But I'm talking to some other folks who have land and who are interested in exploring setting up composting facilities, which also, you know, has potential to do, think about other food loop stuff. I have a dream of really putting together composting with greenhouse growing and farming and, you know, energy, local energy, renewable energy, and connecting all those things into microgrids and stuff like that. But I will leave it off there and look to hear from you all.